Hi, this is Jen. Welcome to Turn the Page. A little preamble to this episode. The horror novel that we are discussing in this interview is a little bit of extreme horror, so please check out any content notes if you think this might be a concern for you before reading this book. All right, thank you and enjoy the interview.
Welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and I'm here with the author of a really fantastic, really let's say harrowing new horror novel. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Yeah, my name's Cody Thompson. I go by Cody J Thompson for the books. Thought it sounded more professional and cool, I guess. But the book that I sent you and we're talking about, my latest, is This One's Gonna Hurt. It's a slasher horror on the surface, but it definitely has a lot more depth and grossness underneath just being a slasher novel.
Yeah, it is. It's a great ride, and
Oh,
just
thank you. I appreciate it.
no problem. And it's funny because when we were initially emailing about it, you had said in one of your early emails, you're like, it's pretty brutal. Like, I just want to warn you. And I was like, I could take it. And then literally like 30 minutes later, I was like, oh my God. But it was so much fun. Like it was really, really, oh, just a wild ride. And
As
so
one of the early readers, actually, I didn't warn them the way I warned you, and I learned my lesson pretty quick. But I was actually at a brewery here locally in San Diego, and one of the early readers, a girl, walked up to me and she slugged me in the arm. She's like, "You didn't warn me about any of the stuff that was happening in the first half of this book." And so I learned my lesson quick to just put out a little warning and let everybody know that it might be more than maybe people even expect from like the back description.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good move, because one, it warns the people who need to be warned. And also, like, if you're like me, that makes me even like more curious. So it's a
Oh,
good
okay.
sales
Yeah.
pitch too, you know.
Yeah.
So before we get into the book too much, I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about your journey to that book, like how you got into writing and horror, and maybe like about the path from your first book to this one.
So I was always, when I was younger, I was a big reader, and then I sort of fell out of it, to be completely honest, and started getting into just other things. And around at the end of high school, I really started getting into playing music, and I was in a band, and we were playing around town and stuff, and figured I would be doing something like that. And of course, that's almost impossible. It's like 0.1% of people actually do that, and that dream died pretty quick after high school, anyways. And I always wanted to write. I wrote a lot as a kid, wrote through high school, and whenever someone would ask in class, like, what's your dream job? A lot of kids would say, I want to be a police officer or a fighter pilot or this or that. And I always, for some reason, would say, like, I want to write in some way. Like, I just have always been interested in it. But I was afraid to show anybody anything. I always just had this fear of rejection or fear of just not being good enough or not being seen as good enough. And it wasn't until COVID lockdown hit
Mm.
that I started to really, like a lot of people, I think I got just fed up with the way the world was going and all the nastiness going on in the world and in the news, and that's a lot of that's still going on, unfortunately. And I just was like, you know what, I'm just going to dive in and try. I'm just going to give it a try. And I just decided if I could create my own world and sort of get locked in my own world, then I could almost escape for the time while I was writing the like nasty world we were forced to be stuck in and forced to live in at the time. And so I started off writing my first novel, which is Bonesaw Serenade, and wrote that during quarantine. Took about a year to get through that one, and being locked at home made it easier to write. Not being able to do anything at all, I let me focus on it a little bit more.
Mm.
And luckily, I sent it around to some people. Definitely didn't get picked up for a while, but then the publisher I'm working with now, Black Rose Writing, wanted to take a chance on it, and I'm super thankful for them. And so that came out in October. No, when did that come? Yeah, October of last year. So there's about a year and a half of a process leading up to the release of it. And then my wife actually read Bonesaw Serenade before anyone else did, before it actually came out or was printed or anything. And I thought Bonesaw Serenade was a little bit too graphic, honestly. I was like, it's more of a thriller inspired horror story, sort of a not a who done it, but like a who can you trust, who can't you trust, who's okay, who's good, who's bad. And then about the halfway through, it starts to get a little more graphic, and there's more of a slasher type element. Definitely not a slasher story, but there's what I thought was very slasher type elements.
Mm.
And when my wife read it, she's like, "I really think you held back on some of the gore." I was like, "Really?" Like, I'm surprised by that. I thought it was a little too much. And she's like, "When you write your next story, I just kind of want to see you push it even further. I want to see how far you can take some of that, because it seemed like you were holding back on some of the graphic elements." So she's like, "Just see how far you can push it. Just don't hold back. Don't be afraid. Just go for it." And then I thought of the story for This One's Gonna Hurt, which I won't give away too much because I don't know what you're going to ask. I don't want to take away from your questions. But as I was thinking of the story of that, I just like, all right, let's just see how far I can push this thing and how gnarly I can make it. And that's kind of how This One's Gonna Hurt came to be. It's just my wife essentially daring me, how far can you take a slasher story? Like, gross me out is basically what she was saying. It's like, all right, let's see what I can do.
Wow, very cool. Yeah, so first off, that's a cool wife. Like, good on her.
Yeah.
Like, that's very cool. And a lot of what you said resonated with me. Because I found myself too, like in the early days of the pandemic, like reading a lot more horror than I had
Hmm.
done before that. Like, I've always been a horror fan, but I do like to kind of mix my genres up. And like
Hmm.
in that particular time period, I just like dove headfirst into horror. And I think at the time I remember saying something, I'm like, you know what, it's just nice to like spend some time being afraid of a specific thing and instead of everything, you know?
Right. Yeah. That's a very good point.
Yeah. So it was like therapeutic in a way.
And
Um,
it's nice when you can if you're reading a horror story, if it gets too scary, or you can take a break from it, the real world horrors that we're all sort of stuck in and living in right now, we can't do anything to get away from any of it. So it's a like horror really is a pretty beautiful escape for the current world we're living in, and probably for generations and generations before what you and I are living right now as well.
yeah, absolutely. I'm super curious about how you got into the slasher genre and writing in and around it. And I think, in particular, like at least for me, like when I thought of slashers, I tended to think of film. But
Mhm.
according like when I look at your book covers, I see too that there is like I feel like you're taking a lot of inspiration too from like sort of classic pulp literature, and a sort of particular, I don't want to say like a particular kind of genre pulpiness.
Mhm.
And so I'm wondering like how did you get into sort of writing slashers and like what do you see as your genre influences?
Well, when I was younger, I read a lot of Goosebumps, like a lot of us probably did, and then I think I really lost track with my enjoyment of reading because hadn't really found the niche of what I like to read yet. And then once I started finding more like independent horror authors and some of the more underground, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, horror writers, I started to really like it relit my love of reading stories and how beautiful like storytelling can be. And that's where I really was like, I just love this. I love this. I love the horror genre. And when I was a kid, I was always terrified of it, which is surprising maybe. But and I was just like, it's not for me because it's either too graphic or it's just like I'm walking away without being scared. And
Mm.
I never really understood that there could be a beauty in horror that doesn't just have to be just straight torture, just straight graphic, just graphic for graphic's sake. There can be like messages within it. There can be beauty within it, and there can be escape within it. And I think I fell off what your question was there. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, like just sort of like you talked a little bit about your entree into like your interest in slasher stuff and like the stuff that influenced your reading in
Oh
your
yeah. Well,
yeah.
so as far as slashers go, like with horror film, like you said, I always thought of slashers as film. Like before I started writing This One's Gonna Hurt, I didn't think that slasher as a novel would even be something people would want. You know what I mean? I like the visuals of a slasher, like the ambiance, the atmosphere of like a slasher movie is kind of what I always expected you'd want as a slasher fan. And with slasher movies, or with horror movies, I still to this day, I'm a massive sucker for like the old 80s sort of campy slashers. It's just like that's what the campier, the goofier, the better. I love them. I can't get enough of them. And so I guess it was kind of like I'm going to take my love of those sort of movies and see if I can put it on paper as a story. Now I'm starting to see there are other people out there that are doing obviously it's been going on for a while, but as I'm diving more into the literary world of horror, I'm noticing there are a lot of people that have had success with that sort of genre as writing, and I just missed out on it for so many years, and it's a shame that I missed out on it. But at least I'm still above ground right now, so I still have some time to introduce myself to a lot of that stuff, and luckily.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's sort of I always find it's like super exciting when I happen upon like a sort of treasure trove of either a genre or something that I haven't discovered. There's like excitement, but also regret of like, oh, I wish I'd found this earlier, but
Hmm.
now I get to do it. So
Yeah, I've been saying that to my wife lately. I'm like, I'm so glad that that I found this stuff in the last like 5 years or so that I've really started to dive into this because I feel like I've missed out on so many amazing projects and stories that people have told throughout the years, even when I was younger, that I could have been reading this stuff. My parents weren't really the type of parents that kept things from me.
Mm,
So I wouldn't have really had a problem like checking out a spooky story from the library when I was a kid. But I hadn't been introduced to it. I wish I would have been because, yeah, I have all this regret of look at all these great things I probably could have read 20 years ago. But like you said, at least I get to experience it now, and maybe I have a better appreciation of it now as an adult. I don't know. Who knows?
absolutely. Do you feel like, well, we'll get into the book after this. I don't want to keep
Hmm.
us distracting us. I apologize.
No problem at all.
Do you think that horror in general is like a genre that really benefits from like you know, word of mouth and like community? Because like I found that when I started to talk to horror writers and horror readers, like they were the people who sort of filled me in on these things that I had missed. And when you're a kid, like you're not really a part of those networks, you know?
Hmm.
Horror is like is a lot of genres are, but horror in particular, I feel is like really kind of community driven in a way. Like horror fans kind of find each other and keep each other informed and stuff like that, you know?
Absolutely. I love that's one of the many things I love about this specific genre and the community around it is that people, first of all, they seem incredibly kind. The ones that I've met have also they've seemed very kind and welcoming. And but there's also like a passion that runs so deep with people that are horror fans. Like it runs so deep within that like their soul, and they want to share what they love, it seems like. And so it's very cool. You could go on like social media, hey, I'm in the mood for a paranormal uh ghost story. What have you got for me? And you could end up with all these replies like this is what I read, it was great. This is what I read, or maybe I'd stay away from this one. But I think there's a passion with horror that just runs so deep where you're like I just want to share this with my friends or with community, and I think that's so cool. I love that about the horror community. Like, you've never seen this movie? What's wrong with you? You got to go see it, right? Come to my house. We've never met. I'm going to show it to you right now.
Yeah, there's like a real joy there and excitement
Hmm.
just about like getting to show people the things that you love and finding new things. And you know, and that's kind of how this interview happened. Like
Hmm.
randomly put out a call on Twitter for like, hey, if you've got a horror novel, like be in touch. And now we're talking. So
Yeah, absolutely. And
so
it proves that that sort of community of wanting to share. Of course, I'm sharing something that I created, but either way, you put something out like that, and people want to share things and they want to share their passions. And I think that that's such a beautiful thing. That is, I just love that. I really do love that.
yeah, me too. All right, so to get into your book, this one's gonna hurt. So as I said earlier, yeah, the beginning of this just like knocked me on my butt. And I was just like compulsively reading after that. And I don't want to talk, you know, too much about what happens past the opening scenes, because I think like going in with sort of like very little preparation, like I think really enhanced my enjoyment. But there's so much that I want to kind of unpack. So
Hmm.
let's talk about these opening scenes. They really hook you very fast. It's a great hook. And it's a great cold open too, you know.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm wondering, like, when you are crafting like the hook for your book, and you're doing something and you're doing so with like a really sort of shocking scene that gives you like a really good taste of what you're in store for, how do you kind of negotiate that balance between like what you show and what you don't show, like what you reveal, what mysteries you sort of set the stage for, and what you kind of keep hidden to keep the reader invested? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, absolutely. I really wanted to, so for this one, I really wanted to open it up, as you said, it hits hard. And I mean, the title itself, the people that have said like it's a little too graphic, it's too much this or that. It's like, well, the title does tell you for the most part what you should be expecting with it. But this specific story, I really wanted to dial in this like loving family, like fulfilling a dream that they had, which is, it starts off with it talking about them moving from one state to from Nevada to California to live out a dream. And like the parents have always wanted to live by the ocean and they've never had the opportunity. And now they have this, they're married for years and they have this beautiful family with two children. And, I actually had one early reader really upset about the like surprise. Again, I don't want to spoil too much, but since we're talking about the beginning, I'll bring it up. But the whole like they are going to surprise the children with Disneyland passes, and the kids don't know about it, and they've always wanted to go to Disneyland, but of course they never comes into reality for them. I really wanted to dial in that like this is a happy family, that they love each other, that they really are excited to be fulfilling a lifelong dream of moving to like their dream home on the coast. And then what I didn't want to reveal was so much about the villain at all. I wanted the villain to seem very ambiguous, very like you don't know why he's there at the time. It could just be a random chance of meeting. It could just, you don't know what this guy's doing in that particular area at this point in time. And of course, later in the book, you learn about like his what he looks like and some of his attributes and stuff. And I didn't want any of that to be out there because I wanted it to seem like maybe it's just some random psycho in the desert. But of course, you learn later that there's like an actual reason behind what he does and why he does it and why he's actually there in the first place. But I wanted all of that to obviously come in as like I go into it thinking of like there's got to be some reveal somewhere, of course, right? You can't. I don't. You put all of it right there in the beginning. I think it's got to be some sort. It's just like a writing trick, I guess. Like, well, what's the reveal going to be later? Okay, I got to keep that for later on. And but for this book, I did already know, like I plot out. I know that there's the whole like conversation between like plotting and not. I like to plot out to see where I'm going. If you were to look at the finished book and compare it to the plot, it would be vastly different because I'll be like, well, this doesn't work anymore. I don't like that. And then, or, a character does something and okay, that would never lead to what I thought of. So let's change that. And so the plot that I wrote up is vastly different. It's just like a kind of a storyboard to go through. And so I knew all the little, like I had an idea of all the little reveals and things I wanted to happen throughout the book. And the really nasty reveals at the end, I knew that was already part of the plan. But yeah, I wanted just to stay on your question. Sorry, I get a little long-winded.
No.
I
Hey, I
apologize.
love it.
But I really wanted to dial in that this was a really happy family going to a dream home that they were very happy about, and I wanted to make sure that the villain was, you don't know why he's there, what he's doing, and it could have just been a chance meeting. Maybe it's a serial killer, who knows? Maybe it's just a guy maybe it's someone from their past that followed them. We don't know. And so I wanted that all to just sort of hang in the air above the readers' heads a little bit.
Nice. Yeah, I really appreciated that it was such a happy family and that it felt very authentic, like they felt like real people to me with like real like dreams that I was like
Mm-hmm.
invested in, even though like, like it's pretty clear things aren't gonna go so well for them so soon.
Mm-hmm.
But and it, I was thinking while I read it that there's another kind of horror, and it's not to knock this because I like this too, like in its own context, that is sometimes like kind of misanthropic towards its victims. Like the
Hmm.
victims have to sort of like earn it in a way or deserve it, by either being like annoying or terrible or,
Hmm.
and like, yeah, not to knock that at all, because I think that that's like a different mode and it's cool too. But I think there's really something to be said for creating like real emotional stakes where like you are invested in these people who are in danger. So is that something
Hmm.
that you thought about too while you were writing?
Absolutely. They're like the family in general. There's no reason for, and there's not enough time in the story to even really dislike them to I get I totally get what you're saying when you see like an annoying character in a slasher get killed. You're like, yeah, I'm okay with that one. Um, but this family, there's no reason that anybody would cheer for what happens to them to happen. Like there's not enough time, there's not enough backstory to even understand that they're bad people and there's no inclination that they are, you
Yeah.
know?
Hmm.
And then the five kids that travel into the desert later in the story, I wanted them all to be like just we all have known somebody like that. Like there's good, but I also wanted there to be like there's a good and a bad side to everybody.
Yeah.
Like the character Lexi in the book is very like vapid and kind of obnoxious. Like if any of us knew her in high school, we probably would be like, I don't like her. I don't want to hang out with her. But at the same time in the book, I felt like she even had some stuff where she is like she had some points of discussion with like the character Valerie that's very like she does have a caring side where
Mm.
she is a little bit obnoxious, and yeah, on the outside you probably be like she sucks a little bit, like if she goes that's okay because she's a little annoying, but she like does try to like bond with like the more innocent Valerie and try to like be friendly with her when the time comes. And even Brad, of course, is just the character Brad is he was the one I wrote mostly to be like the one that no one would really like.
Yeah.
But his story, I really wanted it to come around at the very end. Like I really wanted him specifically. Like I actively thought of, I want him in the end to come around that like even what happens to him in the end sucks because you realize he's really not all bad. So I wanted these characters specifically to be like all of us, there's a good and a bad side to all of us. And on any given day, you could be in a really good mood and be a really good person, or you could be in a bad mood and sort of reserved. And you never know what someone's going through in life.
Mhm.
Everyone's got their own story, and just because someone's rude on a certain day doesn't mean they're a bad person. They might be going through something terrible that we have no idea about. And so I really wanted to dial that in on all five of these kids that there's a good and a bad side. And even when you see them being maybe like Lexi's being vapid and annoying or Brad's being kind of a jerk, maybe it is just a bad day for them. And I really wanted I went into all five of them with that thought of like, I want there to be a good and a bad side to all of them. So you don't really hate any of them.
Hmm. Yeah, because even when they are abrasive or doing things or saying things that you're like, like they're grounded in emotional reality, so you're never
Hmm.
like, these people deserve to die, which is
Yeah.
wait, but which
Because
maintains your emotional investment as a reader, so
because Brad and his like obviously he has sister Jenna in the book, and Brad and Jenna are constantly like butting heads throughout the whole story. But then later in the book, it shows a time where Brad really does care about Jenna, and he's like wants to be there for her and protect her like a big brother would. So went into that even like I just really I want there to be a good and a bad side, just like everyone in the world has. Everyone has a good and a bad day, and I
mm,
wanted them to really reflect that.
yeah. And these protagonists are so often really young too,
Hmm.
they haven't had a lot
Well,
of life
yeah,
experience. So
right. Yeah, when they're like shooting stuff off in the desert and stuff, that's as a kid that sounds fun, but like my age now, I'd be if that were happening outside my house, I'd be like, get away from my house and stop doing that, you know?
speaking of the kids and the scenes that follow up the cold open, if we wanted to call it, um, horror to me also oftentimes kind of like skewers the parts of modern life, that like not like that we don't like, but that that we think create circumstances for fear or stuff like that. So like for instance, the opening scene, to go back a little bit, feels
Hmm.
so reminiscent of like a lot of 70s stuff for me, which is like, sort of like that whole genre of horror that was sort of birthed by like the arrival of the interstate system, and just that people were
Right.
going to like places in the middle of nowhere where,
Hmm.
God knows what happens. And I feel like there's a little bit of that at work too, like in the scenes with the kids where like they're going to like a music festival, right? And like there's stuff earlier with like electric cars, like in the earlier scene,
Hmm.
and so like was there also this sort of like attentiveness to sort of like contemporary life, and how that sort of like creates situations for horror? If I hope that
Abs-
makes sense.
oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that was one of the more interesting things for me to think of while coming up with this story, because I wanted like you mentioned, the electric car. I wanted the electric car to almost be like the catalyst to why all this awful stuff happens. But I have to think about, I don't own an electric car like that, but like I have to think about, like, what do electric cars do? How far do they really go? Like without, like, because you obviously got to stop and charge them. You can't drive them forever, and they're just going to run all the time. Uh, so I'm like, you got to how far can an electric car actually go? And then also, nowadays, being stuck in the middle of the desert, any of us bring out a cell phone, call someone, hey, I'm stuck, come get me. So I had to think of all these little things of like, well, the car, it's basically a computer on wheels. How would the GPS system not be tracked by somebody? How would the cell phones and these are teenagers, like you said, like
Mhm.
teenagers are glued to cell phones and social media and devices. How am I going to make it so that it's like, why didn't one of these kids just call for help and end this in chapter two, you know? And so, yeah, I wanted it to be rooted in what you're talking about, like the old school storyline of being stuck in the middle of nowhere where there's no one for miles, but I wanted it to be contemporary and modern. And it definitely added some new challenges of like, well, these are all the types of modern things that happen in our daily life where it's a lot harder nowadays to be stranded in the middle of nowhere if you have a iPhone or a Android or whatever you have, or an iPad, or your car is essentially a computer on wheels. Like, these things are all built to make it so that type of stuff doesn't happen anymore. So
Yeah.
yeah, I wanted to conceptualize or contemporize it, but and that's actually this how the story even came to be. I was talking to somebody about electric cars, and I was like, where do you charge an electric car if you're on a road trip? Where do you go? And I went online and started searching, like, where do you and this was all just like, I'm not going to write a story about this. I was just curious, like, where do you stop to charge an electric car? I guess I'm just endlessly curious. I wanted to know that. And when the website I went to, I was clicking on pictures of these rest stops that had electric charging stations at them. Like, they're all in the middle of nowhere. How weird is that? Why is that? Why is that? Can't we put one of these like next to a Chick-fil-A or something, or like a Raising Cane's or something? Like, you know, put it by a Michael's so that you can buy some art supplies while you're charging. I don't know, do something.
Absolutely. I did go on a road trip with a friend in an electric car once, like a local one within the state.
Hmm.
And we had to stop for a good, I think it was like 20 to 30 minutes to recharge the car. And I was like, this stinks. Like I
Yeah.
appreciate like the environmental lessened impact and all
Oh,
that. But like
absolutely. Yeah.
there's something to be said for, if you're in a creepy place, like you pump gas and you're in and out in like 2, 3 minutes. So
Hmm. Yeah. And I don't have the electric car based, not because I don't want it. It's just based on the price tag of it is
yeah.
really why I don't have one. If I could, my wife and I would love to have that, because we do, like you said, appreciate and care for the environmental aspect of EV. And if that becomes a thing, I'm in California, and I know that they just passed a thing that's like, in the next, I don't know, 6 years, everyone's going to need to have one.
Oh,
And
wow.
a lot of people are annoyed by it. I'm like, whatever, man. Like, if it's affordable, I'll do it.
Yeah.
But by then, hopefully, these charging stations won't be in the middle of like the scariest places on earth.
Yeah, like that would be great. But again,
Mhm.
it creates so many interesting storytelling opportunities that you have demonstrated in this book. And I think there's also something like really cool to be said for, making the setting of a horror novel like this like so contemporary and feel so familiar and now to us, and
Mhm.
then have characters confronted by something that like, even though he's from somewhere and, but feels like super timeless and mysterious and sort of like there's something really, really cool about that contrast.
Mhm. And someone had asked about, like, I think what you're mentioning, like, where he comes from, the villain, like where he is from and all that. And I've had a few people ask, are you going to do like a part two prequel? I was like, I don't no spoiler alert, but no, I don't think so. I just felt like this is a really good standalone story of just like this is a dude who uh became very motivated by something really, really vile, and that's just who he is.
Yeah. I
I just
love
don't want to. I don't want to screw it up by telling a whole backstory of why he became who he is.
Yeah, because sometimes, like, I mean, that can be cool for storytelling, but also sometimes, like, the things that are really scary are the things that we kind of don't know very much about.
Hmm.
And I think that there's always something to be said for, like, yeah, an element of mystery sort of always being there too. So that's cool. You say you're not planning a prequel then, but like, are you working on anything else right now? Or is there something in the works otherwise?
I actually, yeah, I just signed off. It's going to be through the same publisher, Black Rose. I just signed off on the paperwork, so I have a third novel coming out in May of 2024. So that's already in the works. That's done, submitted. It still needs to go through the final edits and all that, but that one is already planned on the books for it'll be, I think May 23rd is the official date of it. I could be wrong, but end of May is will be my third official novel. And then right now, which no one really knows about, but I'll tell you, I'm happy to talk about it. Oh, I can tell the name of the new one too. I haven't shared that anywhere. I can tell you that. So first time actually sharing the title of the third novel
Ooh.
is right here with you. Is it's titled "Find Him and Kill Him."
That's awesome. That's great. Well, thank you for
Yeah.
the exclusive scoop. I really
Yeah,
appreciate
of course.
that.
So it kind of blends a little bit of my first novel and my second novel. So it's not quite as intense as this one's gonna hurt. It has a little bit more of a like what's going on, and there's definitely a lot of reveals from like the beginning all the way to the end. Like you're gonna want to stick through it to really figure out why what's going on is going on. And I'm really, really happy with the third one. Super stoked with it. I'm really proud of it. So I hopefully people will read it and enjoy it. And
Mm.
then what I'm working on now, which I'm so close to being done with. I'm so close. For the book after that, I think I'm going to try my hand at a collection of horror stories.
Very nice.
So I have 4 already done. I want to write 2 more, and I already have the ideas ready and plotted out. I just need to actually sit down and finish them. I don't know that that'll go anywhere. I don't know that anyone will take it. I don't know that anyone will put it actually in paper and print it, but that's my hope. Because I wanted to try my hand at some short horror stories, and was really proud of the 4 that I've come up with so far. Really happy with them. And but like I said, I have 2 more that I want to sit down and finish, and then have like an actual collection of stories, and they're all going to be based around real world horrors, like real human horrors, essentially, like uh bad people doing bad things, and why is kind of what the reason that's what every single story will be about.
Ooh. Well, that sounds awesome. And I hope that you would consider coming back to the show to talk about either one of those because that
Oh,
book's
I would love to.
too. So all right, we'll see you, in a little under a year then.
Yeah, that would be great. I will absolutely, as soon as I have early editions of Find Him and Kill Him, I would love to send it. I'll send it on over to you. I'd love for you to read it and see what you think.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. This has been a lot of fun, and I'm really excited for our listeners to check out this book.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for reading, and I'm really glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you. All right, listeners, please check out This One's Gonna Hurt. It's available now. So go to your favorite independent bookstore, library, wherever you like to get your books. Check it out. Thank you so much for joining us. It is now time to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.